The young German soldier stood frozen in the doorway, not from fear, not from combat, from confusion. Behind him, the wire fences of Camp Hearn stretched across the Texas prairie. Around him, other prisoners shuffled through the mess hall line, their vermouth uniforms faded and patched. They'd surrendered weeks ago in Tunisia, starving, sunburnt, grateful to be alive. But this made no sense. The American sergeant wasn't handing out rations. He was handing out dessert, a full scoop of vanilla ice cream, fresh, cold, glistening under the fluorescent lights. The German stared at it like it was a grenade. "Go on," the sergeant said, nodding. "It's yours." The prisoner took the bowl with trembling hands. His fingers, calloused from trench work and rifle drills, felt the chill of the metal. He looked around. Other POS were already eating. Some laughed, some cried quietly. One man simply sat down on the floor and wept into his hands. Ice cream, not bread, not soup, not the thin gruel they'd eaten for months in the Afrika Korps. Ice cream. In the middle of a world war. The soldier took a bite. The sweetness hit him like a memory he'd forgotten. Sunday afternoons in Bavaria. His mother's kitchen, a time before everything burned. He closed his eyes. For 5 seconds, the war disappeared. Then, he opened them again, and he realized something far more terrifying than any artillery barrage he'd ever survived. America wasn't just fighting a war, America was fighting a war, and still making ice cream. Tons of it. Shipped across oceans, delivered to front lines, rationed to prisoners, mass-produced in floating factories on battleships and cargo holds, while his own country melted down church bells for bullets and sent 14-year-olds to the front with single-shot rifles. The Americans were engineering refrigeration units for the Pacific Theater. He looked at the bowl in his hands, and he understood, for the first time, why Germany had already lost. But how? How does a nation at total war rationing rubber, steel, and fuel? How does it justify building ice cream barges? How do you convince generals, engineers, and taxpayers that frozen desert is a weapon of war? And what did it do to the men who realized that their enemy didn't just have more tanks, they had more of everything? This is the story of the most psychologically devastating weapon America deployed in World War II. Not a bomb, not a rifle, a desert. Let's go back to 1942. The world is on fire. Europe is a graveyard. The Eastern Front is a frozen meat grinder. The Pacific is a naval chess match played with human lives. And America late to the war, untested. Underestimated is scrambling to build an army from scratch. But there's a problem. Not just logistics. Not just production. Something deeper. Morale. The United States military is facing a crisis no one saw coming. Young men, farmhands from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, college students from New England are being shipped to jungles, deserts, and frozen tundras, places they can't pronounce, enemies they've never seen, death that comes without warning, and they're breaking combat fatigue, shell shock, psychological collapse. The terms don't matter. The reality does. Soldiers are cracking under the weight of endless deployment, terrible food, and the suffocating knowledge that they might never go home. The brass knows this. General George Marshall, Admiral Ernest King, Secretary of War Henry Stimson. They've read the reports from World War I. They know what happens when morale collapses. Mutinies, desertions, entire divisions refusing orders. The French army in 1917 nearly disintegrated because men were treated like expendable parts in a machine, but America cannot let that happen. But how do you keep a man fighting when he's 10,000 miles from home, eating canned hash, sleeping in mud, and watching his friends die? The answer seems absurd. You give him ice cream. Not as a joke, not as a luxury. As a strategic necessity. The logic is colder than any freezer unit. A soldier who believes his country values him, who feels like a human being. Not a serial number, will fight harder, longer, and more effectively. A soldier who tastes strawberry ice cream in a New Guinea foxhole doesn't just get a sugar rush, he gets hope. He gets a reminder that somewhere, back home, there are still soda fountains and diners and Sunday picnics. that the world he's fighting for still exists, that he's not just surviving, he's worth something. The Army General Staff meets in Washington. They commission studies, psychologists, nutritionists, industrial engineers. The conclusion is unanimous. Ice cream is a morale booster second only to mail from home, and unlike letters, ice cream can be mass-produced, so the order goes out. Build floating ice cream factories. Retrofit ships. Install freezers on aircraft carriers. Create portable refrigeration units that can survive tropical heat, submarine attacks, and supply chain chaos. The goal? Every American serviceman, no matter where he's stationed, will have access to ice cream at least once a week. It sounds impossible. It is impossible. But this is America in 1942. A country that built the Hoover Dam, electrified the Tennessee Valley, and mass-produced automobiles for the middle class. A nation that doesn't ask, can we, but how fast? So they do it by 1943. The US military is producing over 1 million gallons of ice cream per year in combat zones alone. Factories churn it out in Greenland, North Africa, the Aleutian Islands, and the South Pacific. Navy ships are retrofitted with ice cream parlors. The USS Comfort, a hospital ship, serves patients recovering from amputations and burns with 3 flavors: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. But it's not enough, because America isn't just feeding its own soldiers, it's feeding everyone. British troops, exhausted after Dunkirk and the Blitz, receive American ice cream shipments and think they've stumbled into a fever dream. Australian soldiers in New Guinea line up for scoops alongside Marines. Even Soviet officers, grim and battle-hardened, are gifted ice cream during Lend-Lease meetings and struggle to hide their astonishment. And then? The prisoners. German POWs, Italian POWs, Japanese POWs, men who've been told, for years, that America is weak, decadent, corrupt, a nation of soft individualists who will crumble under the discipline of the Reich or the Emperor. They arrive at POW camps expecting starvation rations, forced labor, cruelty. Instead, they get 3 meals a day, medical care, and ice cream. For the Germans, it's a psychological earthquake, because they know what's happening back home. They've received letters. They've heard whispers. Germany is starving. Cities are rubble. The Luftwaffe is grounded for lack of fuel. Women and children are digging through trash for potato peels. And here, in a Texas prison camp, their captors are casually handing out frozen desert, not because they're soft, because they can. The realization spreads through the camps like a virus. We didn't just lose the war, we never had a chance. But how did it start? What turned a simple dessert into a tool of industrial and psychological warfare? To understand that, we need to go back further, to the moment someone realized that ice cream wasn't just food, it was ammunition. The problem started quietly. 1941. Before Pearl Harbor. Before America entered the war, the military is preparing, slowly, reluctantly, for the possibility of conflict. Planners are drawing up logistics maps, supply chains, food distribution. And someone notices a pattern. Soldiers stationed in the Philippines, Panama, and Hawaii are reporting higher rates of heat exhaustion, illness, and desertion than troops stationed stateside. It's not just the climate, it's not just the isolation, it's the monotony. Canned rations, powdered eggs, dehydrated vegetables, meals designed for efficiency, not humanity. Day after day, the same tasteless sludge. The same joyless routine. Men are losing weight, losing focus, losing will. A nutritionist at the Army Quartermaster Corps, a man named Paul Logan, starts digging into the data. He's not a general, not a politician, just a mid-level bureaucrat with a background in food science and an annoying habit of asking questions no one wants to answer. He reads reports from World War I. French troops who mutinied in 1917 cited terrible food as a primary grievance. British soldiers in the trenches hoarded jam and chocolate like gold. The Ottoman Empire's collapse was accelerated by starvation among its own troops. Morale, Logan realizes, isn't abstract, it's biochemical. It's the difference between a man who can still smile and a man who's given up. Logan writes a memo. It's only 3 pages long. The thesis is simple. Troops need pleasure foods, not luxuries, foods that remind them they're human. Ice cream tops the list. The memo is ignored. Then Pearl Harbor happens. Suddenly, Logan's memo doesn't seem so crazy anymore. The military is mobilizing millions of men, shipping them to the Pacific, North Africa, Europe. If even 5% break down psychologically, the war effort is crippled. Someone in the War Department remembers Logan's memo, and they call him in. Can it be done? They ask. Can what be done? Ice cream. Front lines. Jungle heat. No refrigeration infrastructure. Can you make it work? Logan hesitates. Because the truth is, he doesn't know. Ice cream requires cold, consistent, uninterrupted cold. In a jungle that's 95 degrees with 100% humidity. On a ship crossing the equator under enemy submarine threat. In a forward operating base with no electricity. The technology doesn't exist. But Logan nods anyway. Yes, he says. We can do it. He's lying. But it's the kind of lie that wins wars. Logan assembles a team, engineers from General Electric, Westinghouse, and Frigidaire, chemists, mechanical designers, men who've built refrigerators for suburban kitchens and ice machines for soda, fountains. Now they're being asked to build freezers that can survive torpedoes. The first prototypes fail. Compressors overheat in tropical climates. Refrigerant leaks. Ice cream melts into soup before it reaches the serving line. One batch spoils and causes an outbreak of food poisoning among test troops. Another freezes so hard it shatters teeth. Logan's team is exhausted, demoralized. They're engineers, not miracle workers. But Logan keeps pushing. Find a way, he says, because if we don't, someone else will die thinking America forgot about him. The team works 18-hour days. They test insulation materials, redesign compressor systems, experiment with new They build mobile units that can be towed behind trucks, floating barges equipped with industrial freezers, portable kits that can be airdropped into forward positions, and slowly, impossibly, it starts to work. By mid-1942, the first functional ice cream units are deployed to the Pacific. Small batches, experimental, but they work. Soldiers gather around the machines like it's a religious experience. Men who haven't smiled in weeks stand in line for a single scoop. Some cry, some laugh, some just eat in silence, savoring every molecule. Word spreads. Commanders notice. When troops have access to ice cream, sick call rates drop. Discipline improves. Re-enlistment requests go up. Even frontline casualties seem to recover faster when there's dessert waiting at the field hospital. Ice cream isn't just morale, it's medicine. The military takes notice, and they scale up. Factories are built in Greenland, Iceland, Australia, and North Africa. Ships are retrofitted with onboard ice cream parlors. The Navy's construction battalions, the CBS, prioritize installing freezer units alongside ammunition depots. By 1943, the program is producing millions of gallons annually. But there's still one problem: the enemy. Because the Germans and Japanese aren't stupid. They intercept supply shipments. They capture equipment. They interrogate prisoners. And when they learn what's inside those crates, marked refrigeration units, they don't believe it. It has to be a trick. A code, a cover for secret weapons. Because no rational military would ship ice cream to a war zone, would they? The Axis powers are about to learn a hard lesson. America isn't rational. America is abundant, and abundance, it turns out, is the most terrifying weapon of all. His name was Lieutenant Commander Harold Mitchell. Navy career officer. 38 years old, balding, unremarkable, the kind of man you'd walk past in a hallway without noticing. But Mitchell had a gift. He could see problems no one else saw. And, in the spring of 1943, he saw a big one. The Navy's ice cream program was working. Ships in the Pacific were serving dessert to crews. Morale was high. But there was a bottleneck. The carrier's aircraft, Carriers, the floating cities that projected American air power across the Pacific, had no room for ice cream factories. Every square inch was dedicated to fuel, ammunition, aircraft, and crew quarters. Adding freezers wasn't just impractical, it was dangerous. Refrigeration units used flammable a direct hit could turn a freezer into a bomb. Admirals weren't willing to risk billion-dollar warships for desert, so carrier crews went without. While destroyer crews ate ice cream. While submarine crews ate ice cream. While even the supply ships had ice cream, the men flying combat missions off carrier decks got nothing. Mitchell thought this was insane, because carrier pilots weren't just soldiers, they were flying the most dangerous missions in the war, launching from pitching decks in the middle of the ocean, dogfighting Zeros at 20,000 feet, landing on a moving runway the size of a postage stamp, and they were cracking. Pilots were reporting higher rates of combat fatigue, nervous breakdowns, refusal to fly. Some were quietly reassigned, some were sedated. One pilot, after his 16th mission, walked off the flight deck and into the ocean. Mitchell read the incident reports, and he got angry, not at the pilots, at the system. These men are flying suicide missions, he told his commanding officer. And we can't give them a scoop of ice cream. There's no room, Harold. Then make room. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Mitchell was told to drop it, to focus on his actual job, overseeing supply logistics for the Pacific Fleet. He ignored the order. Instead, he started sketching. Mitchell wasn't an engineer. He'd never designed anything more complicated than a filing cabinet. But he understood space. He'd spent 15 years managing cargo holds, supply chains, and storage compartments. He knew every inch of a carrier's infrastructure, and he had an idea. What if you didn't add an ice cream factory to a carrier? What if you built one into the ship itself? He started with the USS Lexington carrier that had survived multiple kamikaze attacks and was due for a refit. Mitchell studied the blueprints. He found unused voids between fuel tanks, dead space beneath crew quarters, ventilation shafts that could be rerouted. He sketched a compact ice cream system, minimal footprint, non-flammable roof, powered by the ship's auxiliary generators. It was brilliant. It was also unauthorized. Mitchell didn't care. He took his sketches to a refrigeration engineer at General Electric, a man named Thomas Byrne, who'd helped design the original portable ice cream units. Byrne looked at the drawings. This could work, he said slowly. Will you build it? I don't have authorization. I'll get authorization. From who? Someone who matters. Mitchell bypassed the chain of command. He wrote directly to the Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal. A one-page letter, no jargon, no bureaucracy. Sir, carrier pilots are dying because they have no morale support. I can fix this with ice cream. It will cost $5,000 and 3 weeks. If I'm wrong, fire me. If I'm right, save lives. LCDR Harold Mitchell Forrestal read the letter, and he laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was audacious. He approved it. 3 weeks later, the USS Lexington was docked in Pearl Harbor. Mitchell and Byrne worked around the clock, installing the prototype system in a recessed compartment beneath the hangar deck. Compact freezers, insulated piping, a hand-cranked dispenser. It looked like something out of a science fiction novel, but it worked. The first batch was vanilla, 30 gallons. Enough for the entire air wing. The crew lined up, pilots, mechanics, gunners, men who'd been at sea for 6 months without a day off. Men who'd watched friends die in burning cockpits. The first pilot took a bite. He closed his eyes. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Others followed. Some laughed. Some cried. One pilot, a kid from Nebraska named Danny Wright, ate his scoop so fast he got brain freeze. He doubled over, clutching his head. And his squadron mates cheered, because for the first time in months, they felt like people again. Mitchell stood in the corner of the hangar, watching. He didn't smile. Didn't take credit. Just watched. And then he went back to his quarters and wrote another letter. Sir, it worked. I recommend installing these units on every carrier in the fleet. Mitchell Forrestal didn't just approve it, he made it mandatory. By the end of 1943, every major U.S. aircraft carrier had an onboard ice cream system. Production capacity, 50 gallons per day. Enough for every crew member to get a serving at least twice a week. Pilots called it the miracle machine. Mechanics called it the freezer that won the war. Mitchell called it common sense. But to the men who flew off those decks, it was hope in a bowl. And when German POWs heard about this, when they learned that America had built ice cream factories into warships, they stopped asking how the war would end. They already knew. The revelation didn't happen in a laboratory. It happened in a barbed wire camp in West Texas, Camp Hearn. 1,944, 5,000 German POWs. Most were Afrika Korps veteransmen who'd fought under Rommel, survived the desert, and surrendered in Tunisia. They arrived expecting brutality. They got ice cream. The camp commandant, colonel named George Martin, understood psychology better than most generals. He'd studied the Geneva Conventions. He knew that well-treated POWs caused fewer problems, attempted fewer escapes, and provided better intelligence, so Martin ran Hearn like a small town, not a prison. POWs had recreation time, sports leagues, even a small library stocked with German-language books. They worked on local farms for modest wages, which they could spend at the camp canteen. And, once a week, they got ice cream. But Martin noticed something strange. The prisoners weren't just eating the ice cream, they were studying it. One POWR, former Wehrmacht engineer named Klaus Hober, started asking questions. Where does this come from? A factory in San Antonio, the guard said. How far? About 80 miles. Hober did the math in his head. 80 miles. Texas heat. No refrigerated trucks visible. Yet the ice cream arrived fresh, unmelted, perfectly scooped. How do you keep it cold? The guard shrugged. Refrigerated transport, I guess. But Hober didn't believe him. Because he knew refrigeration. Before the war, he'd worked for Siemens, designing industrial cooling systems for German factories. He understood compressors, insulation, thermodynamics, and he knew that what the Americans were doing was impossible. You couldn't transport ice cream 80 miles in 95-degree heat without military-grade refrigeration infrastructure. The kind of infrastructure that Germany and advanced industrial power had struggled to build even in peacetime, yet America was doing it casually, routinely. For prisoners, Hober started paying attention to other details. The camp's food shipments, the variety, fresh vegetables, meat, bread. The guards ate the same meals as the prisoners, which meant there was no scarcity, no rationing. He listened to the radio broadcasts, listened to guards talk, pieced together fragments of information. America was producing more in 1944 than it had in 1941. More tanks, more planes, more ships, more food. The country wasn't straining under the weight of war, it was accelerating. Hober wrote letters, home carefully censored by camp authorities, but still revealing. He described the food, the abundance, the ice cream. His family wrote back. Klaus, you must be exaggerating. No one has ice cream anymore, not even the officers. But he wasn't exaggerating, and neither were the other prisoners. Word spread through the POW camps. Hearn, Alva, Oklahoma, Concordia, Kansas, hundreds of camps across the American interior. Germans and Italians, and even a few Japanese prisoners, all receiving the same treatment. 3 meals a day, medical care, recreation, ice cream for many. It was the first time they'd eaten well in years. One prisoner, a young soldier named Dieter Schneider, kept a diary. His entries are preserved in the National Archives. June 12, 1944. They gave us ice cream today. I thought it was a joke. A test. I didn't eat it at first, but Hans did, and he didn't die, so I tried it. It tasted like my grandmother's kitchen. I cried. I am not ashamed. June 15, 1944. The guards don't hate us. They don't even seem angry. One of them, a boy from Ohio, asked me about Berlin. We talked for an hour. He gave me a cigarette. I don't understand this war anymore. June 22, 1944 Klaus says we've already lost. He says any country that can make ice cream in the middle of a war is unstoppable. I think he's right. I don't want to go home. That last line is haunting. I don't want to go home. Because home was a nightmare. Cities bombed into rubble. Starvation, the Gestapo. The Eastern Front collapsing. The Reich's desperate suicidal final stands. In America, even prisoners lived better than German civilians, and the Germans knew it. This was the revelation. Not just that America had more resources, that was obvious. The revelation was that America was choosing to use those resources on something as trivial as ice cream, because it wasn't trivial, it was a message. We are so far ahead of you that we can afford to care about happiness. We are winning so decisively that we have time to think about morale. We are not desperate. We are not starving. We are not afraid. We are making ice cream. For the Germans, this was psychologically devastating, because they'd been told for years that Americans were weak, soft, individualistic. That German discipline, German engineering, German willpower would crush them. But ice cream exposed the lie. America wasn't weak. It was ruthlessly efficient. It had industrialized joy. Mass-produced hope, weaponized abundance, and there was no counter to that. You can't out-discipline a country that treats ice cream as a logistical priority. You can't out-sacrifice a nation that still has enough surplus to care about prisoner morale. Germany had bet everything on total war, on turning every man, woman, and child into a cog in the war machine. America had simply outproduced them, and it did so while still eating. Desert. Klaus Hober understood this. He stopped asking questions about the ice cream because he'd already figured out the answer. The war was over. Germany had lost. Not because of a single battle, not because of a secret weapon, because America could make ice cream on the front lines, and Germany couldn't. The revelation wasn't just technological. It was philosophical. America had proven that abundant austerity wins wars. That caring for your people, even your enemies, is a strength, not a weakness. That the future belongs to whoever can build enough so that no one has to suffer unnecessarily. The Germans called it propaganda, but it wasn't. It was just America. Overwhelming, unstoppable, impossibly generous, and absolutely terrifying. By 1944, the ice cream program had become a global phenomenon. It wasn't just a morale booster anymore, it was a symbol in the Pacific. The Navy constructed the largest ice cream barge in history, a floating factory ship capable of producing 10,000 gallons per day. Sailors called it the ice cream ship. Officially, it was designated X-510, but everyone knew it by its nickname, Sweet Surrender. The barge traveled with the fleet, resupplying carriers, destroyers, and submarines. When it pulled into port, thousands of sailors lined up on the docks. Not for mail, not for shore leave, for ice cream. One sailor gunner's mate, named Jimmy Doyle, described it in a letter home. "Ma, you won't believe this. We just sank 3 Japanese destroyers yesterday. Lost 12 good men. Today, we're eating strawberry ice cream on the deck of the ship. It don't make sense. But somehow, it does. It reminds us we're still alive. That there's still something worth fighting for." Doyle survived the war. He opened an ice cream parlor in Boston in 1947. He never charged veterans. In Europe, the story was the same. American soldiers advancing through France and Germany brought portable ice cream kits with them. These weren't luxuries, they were standard issue. Engineers set up temporary freezers in liberated towns. Freed prisoners of war allied soldiers who'd been starved in German camps were given ice cream as part of their recovery treatment. Doctors noticed something remarkable. Men recovering from severe malnutrition responded better when they were given ice cream alongside standard medical rations. Not just physically, the sweetness, the coldness, the sheer improbability of eating ice cream in a bombed-out French village. It brought them back to life. One British peer freed from Starlock Luft 3, described his first taste of American ice cream. "I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. We'd been eating sawdust, bread, and cabbage soup for 2 years. Then these Yanks show up with tanks, cigarettes, and bloody ice cream. I kissed the first American I saw. Didn't even ask his name." But the most significant transformation happened in the POW camps by late 1944. Over 400,000 German and Italian POWs were held in camps across the United States. The military strategy was clear: treat them well, feed them, show them what America looked like, turn them into ambassadors. Because the war wouldn't last forever, eventually, these men would go home, and when they did, they'd carry memories. Not of cruelty, not of starvation, of ice cream. That the strategy worked after the war. Thousands of German POWs returned to their ruined homeland and told stories about America, about the food, the abundance, the generosity. Some emigrated back to the US legally. They became citizens, started businesses, raised families. One former POWR man named Friedrich Weber settled in Iowa and opened a dairy farm. He sold ice cream at county fairs. When asked why, he said, "Because in 1944, an American soldier gave me a scoop of vanilla ice cream, and I realized that any country that cares that much about making people happy is a country worth living in." Weber's farm still operates today. His grandchildren run it. But the triumph wasn't just individual, it was industrial. By the end of the war, the US military had perfected the art of large-scale refrigeration in hostile environments. The technology developed for ice cream production was immediately repurposed for other uses: refrigerated medical supplies, blood plasma transport, vaccine storage. The same systems that kept ice cream frozen in the South Pacific later kept polio vaccines cold during the 1950s. Eradication campaigns. The same engineers who designed floating ice cream barges went on to create the refrigerated shipping containers that revolutionized global trade. Ice cream didn't just win the war, it built the post-war world. In 1945, Japan surrendered. American forces occupied Tokyo. General Douglas MacArthur established headquarters. The Japanese people, traumatized, starving, defeated, waited to see what the conquerors would do. The answer: ice cream trucks. The US military set up distribution points across Tokyo. Free ice cream for children: strawberry, vanilla, chocolate. Kids who'd lived through firebombing campaigns and atomic blasts lined up with wide eyes. Many had never tasted ice cream before. One Japanese girl, Hiroko Yamamoto, later a prominent journalist, recalled the moment in her memoir. "I was 7 years old. My father had died in the war. My mother was sick. We had nothing. Then, an American soldier handed me a cone of pink ice cream. I didn't know what it was. I licked it, and it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. I remember thinking, maybe the war is really over." That image, American soldiers handing ice cream to Japanese children, was broadcast around the world. It wasn't propaganda, it was just what happened, because that's what America did, even in victory. It chose generosity. Back in the United States, the soldiers came home. The factories retooled. The wartime economy shifted to peacetime abundance. But the ice cream program didn't stop. It became permanent. The US military still maintains ice cream production facilities on bases worldwide. Sailors still eat ice cream on aircraft carriers. Soldiers still get dessert in combat zones. Because once you've proven that caring for your people works, why would you stop? The transformation was complete. Ice cream had gone from a luxury to a necessity. From a morale booster to a weapon of war. From a sweet treat to a philosophy. And the world noticed, because in the end, America didn't just defeat fascism with bullets and bombs, it defeated it with abundance. With the radical idea that even in the darkest times, people deserve to smile. The war ended, but the ice cream didn't. In the decades that followed, the psychological and industrial lessons of the wartime ice cream program rippled outward, reshaping American culture, military doctrine, and even global economics. First, the veterans. Millions of men returned home with stories. Not just of combat, but of care. They'd seen their country invest in their happiness even in the middle of a war. That experience changed them. They expected more from their employers, their communities, their government. The post-war economic boom wasn't just about factories and suburbs. It was about a generation of men who believed that prosperity mattered. That quality of life wasn't a luxury, it was a right. Ice cream parlors exploded across America in the late 1940s. Drive-ins, diners, soda fountains. These weren't just businesses, they were cultural symbols of the world the veterans had fought to preserve. One veteran, a Marine named Robert Shaw, used his GI Bill benefits to open an ice cream shop in Portland, Oregon. He called it Sweet Victory. When asked why ice cream, he said, "Because that's what America tastes like. And I wanted to make sure no one ever forgets." Shaw's shop stayed open for 43 years. It closed in 1992, the year he died. The building is now a historical landmark. Second, the military learned the success of the ice cream program proved something revolutionary. Morale is measurable. It's not abstract. It's not touchy-feely. It's a tactical advantage. Modern US military doctrine still reflects this. Bases have gyms, movie theaters, fast food franchises. Deployed soldiers have access to Wi-Fi care packages. And yes, ice cream. Critics call it coddling. But the data doesn't lie. Units with higher morale have lower rates of PTSD, fewer disciplinary issues, and better combat performance. The investment pays for itself, and it all started with a scoop of vanilla in 1943. Third, the technology spread. The refrigeration innovations developed during the war didn't stay military. They became civilian. The same portable freezer units used in the Pacifica adapted for commercial use. Suddenly, ice cream trucks could operate in summer heat. Supermarkets could stock frozen foods year-round. Rural areas, places that had never had reliable refrigeration, could finally preserve medicine, food, and yes, ice cream. The global cold chain was born from a military program designed to deliver desert to soldiers. By the 1950s, American refrigeration technology was being exported worldwide. Developing nations received technical assistance to build their own cold storage systems. The technology that kept ice cream frozen in New Guinea helped deliver vaccines to Africa and preserve food in South America. Lives were saved. All because someone decided soldiers deserved ice cream. Fourth, the POWs came home. Those German prisoners who'd eaten American ice cream in Texas and Oklahoma returned to a Germany that no longer existed. Cities reduced to rubble. Families scattered. The economy destroyed. Many struggled with what they'd seen, not the horrors of war they'd expected but the abundance. The casual, overwhelming generosity of a nation that could afford to care about prisoner morale while fighting a two-front war. Some became staunch anti-communists, having seen firsthand what American capitalism could produce. Others became advocates for European integration, believing that cooperation, not conquest, was the path forward. Friedrich Weber wasn't alone in emigrating. Thousands of former POWs returned to America legally in the 1950s and 60s. They became engineers, farmers, teachers, businessmen. They married American women, raised American children, built American lives, and they never forgot the ice cream. One former POW, Hans Muller, who settled in Wisconsin, gave an interview in 1985. "People ask me why I left Germany. I tell them, in 1944, I was a prisoner of war, and America gave me ice cream. In 1946, I was a free man in Germany, and I was starving. Where would you choose to live?" Muller's son became a U.S. Army officer. His grandson serves in the Air Force today. But perhaps the most profound legacy is philosophical. The ice cream program proved something that no political theory or economic model could. Abundance is strength, not scarcity, not sacrifice, not austerity, abundance. The Soviet Union tried to outsuffer the West. It rationed everything, glorified hardship, and demanded total sacrifice from its citizens. It collapsed. China's early communist experiments followed the same path. Mass starvation, cultural purges, decades of deprivation. Then it embraced markets, abundance, growth, and it thrived. The lesson of World War II wasn't just military, it was economic. Nations that care for their people, that invest in happiness, not just survival, are stronger, not weaker. They innovate faster, fight harder, build better. America understood this in 1943. The rest of the world took decades to catch up. Today, US Navy ships still have ice cream. The tradition continues. Sailors on deployment still line up for scoops. It's not just nostalgia, it's doctrine. In 2019, the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln held an ice cream social during a tense standoff with Iran in the Persian Gulf. Sailors ate chocolate chip cookie dough while F-18s launched combat air patrols overhead. One officer was asked if it seemed surreal. He said, "This is who we are. We fight when we have to, but we never forget why we're fighting." Ice cream reminds us that the world we're defending is worth defending. Lieutenant Commander Harold Mitchell, the man who put ice cream on carriers, never received a medal, never got a promotion for his innovation. He retired in 1958 as a commander, died quietly in 1971. No obituary mentioned the ice cream, but thousands of pilots flew safer missions because of him. Thousands of sailors stayed sane because of him. And millions of people across generations, across continents, live in a world shaped by a simple idea that even in war, people deserve sweetness. That caring is not weakness. That abundance wins. Mitchell never knew his legacy, but it's frozen in history. One scoop at a time. Let's go back to that German soldier. The one standing in the mess hall at Camp Herne, holding a bowl of ice cream with trembling hands. His name was Ernst Bauer. 20-2 years old. Farm boy from Bavaria. Drafted at 18. Fought in Poland, France, North Africa. Saw his best friend die in a minefield outside Tobruk. Surrendered in Tunisia, with sand in his boots, and no hope left. He expected execution. He got ice cream. That moment, that single scoop of vanilla, broke something inside him, not his spirit. His certainty, because Ernst had been told his whole life that Germans were superior. That discipline, sacrifice, and hardship made nations strong. That America was weak, decadent, doomed to collapse under the weight of its own excess. But as he tasted that ice cream, he realized the truth. America wasn't weak, it was impossibly strong. Strong enough to fight a global war on 4 continents, and still care about whether a prisoner felt human. Strong enough to build floating factories, refrigerated barges, and portable freezers just to deliver dessert. Strong enough to prove that abundance, not austerity, wins. Ernst finished his ice cream. He set the bowl down, and he whispered to the man next to him, "We never had a chance, did we?" The other prisoner, grizzled sergeant from Hamburg, shook his head. "No, we didn't." Ernst survived the war. He returned to Germany in 1946, worked as a carpenter, rebuilt his village, married had 3 children. He never spoke about the war, except once. In 1983, his grandson, a university student, studying history, asked him what it was like to be a prisoner in America. Ernst was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "They gave us ice cream." His grandson didn't understand. That's it. Just ice cream. Ernst looked at him. His eyes, still sharp at 63, seemed to see something far away. "No, not just ice cream. They gave us proof." "Proof of what?" Ernst smiled sadly. "That we'd chosen the wrong side." He died 2 years later. Never visited America, never wrote about his experiences, but he told his children one thing, over and over. If you ever have to choose between a nation that offers you suffering and a nation that offers you ice cream, choose the ice cream. That's the lesson. Not a political lesson. Not a military lesson. A human lesson. Nations that care for their people truly care. Not just in propaganda, but in practice. Are the nations that endure. Not because care is soft, because care is strategic. A soldier who believes his country values him will fight harder. A citizen who trusts the system will build more. A prisoner who's treated humanely will question his cause. Ice cream wasn't a weapon, It was a philosophy. The philosophy that won World War II, and it's still winning. Today, think about it. Why do people risk their lives to immigrate to America? Not because of military power, not because of abstract ideals, because of abundance, because somewhere deep down, they believe that in America, even the prisoners get ice cream. That promise, spoken or unspoken, is the most powerful force in geopolitics. It toppled the Soviet Union. It's reshaping China. It's pulling the world slowly toward systems that prioritize human flourishing over ideological purity. And it all started with a Navy lieutenant who thought pilots deserved dessert with an engineer who refused to accept impossible with a bureaucrat who wrote a 3-page memo about morale. With a country that decided in the middle of the largest war in human history that happiness mattered. That's the story. Not of tanks or bombers or battles, but of ice. Creamed up, frozen, delivered, shared. One scoop at a time. And here's the thing. The German soldier Ernst Bauer, his grandson, eventually did visit America in 1995. A research trip to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. He was writing his doctoral thesis on POW treatment during World War II. He spent weeks reading documents, interview transcripts, supply manifests, and he found something. A memo, dated June 1944, from the commandant of Camp Hearn to the War Department. It read, "Prisoner morale remains high. Ice cream rations proving exceptionally effective. Recommend continuation of program. Several prisoners have expressed interest in remaining in U.S. after war. Preliminary approval requested for voluntary labor program." Ernst's grandson sat in the archive reading room, and he cried, because he understood. His grandfather, the man who'd fought for Hitler, who'd believed in the Reich, who'd surrendered in the desert expecting death, had been saved by ice cream. Not physically, spiritually. He'd been shown a different way, a better way, and he'd carried that lesson home. The grandson finished his thesis. It was published in 1998, became required reading in German universities studying post-war reconciliation. The title, "The Sweetness of Surrender: How American Abundance Defeated Fascism." He dedicated it to his grandfather. To Ernst Bauer, who died believing that the best thing America ever did was give ice cream to its enemies, because that's what separates civilization from barbarism. Not technology, not firepower. Generosity. The willingness to see your enemy as human, to feed him, treat him, offer him something sweet even when he deserves nothing. That's power, not the power to destroy, the power to transform. And transformation, not domination, is what lasts. Ships that carried ice cream are gone now, scrapped or sunk. The soldiers who ate it are dying. The camps are empty. The factories are museums. But the idea remains. Frozen in memory, passed down through stories, whispered by grandfathers to grandsons. They gave us ice cream, and in those 4 words, an entire philosophy, a way of seeing the world, a belief that even in the darkest times, sweetness matters, that caring is strength, that abundance wins. So the next time you see an ice cream truck, or stand in line at a shop, or open your freezer and pull out a pint. Remember, you're not just eating dessert, you're tasting victory. The victory of a nation that believed against all logic, against all precedent, that even war could be waged with kindness, that even enemies deserved dignity, that even in fire and blood and chaos, there should still be ice cream, because that's the world worth fighting for. Not one without suffering, but one where suffering is never the goal, where even prisoners eat well, where even in war, there's room for joy. That's America's promise, not perfection, not purity. Abundance, and it's written in every scoop. Every cone, every frozen, impossible, beautiful bite.